So a pleasant good afternoon to everyone. My name is Priscilla Liebert Calder, and I'm the event coordinator here at the NJSBDC at Rutgers-Newark. And on behalf of Dr. Tendai Ndoro, I would like to welcome you to our webinar on exploring franchise opportunities to start a business. For those of you who are not familiar with the SBDC, which stands for Small Business Development Centers, we are the premier provider of business training and consulting services to established small businesses, startups, and entrepreneurs in the state of New Jersey. But more in particular to those businesses residing in Essex County, New Jersey. We are one of 12 centers in the NJSBDC network, each center being responsible for one or more counties. Our center is hosted by the Rutgers Business School and funded through a partnership agreement between the United States Small Business Administration, Rutgers University, and the New Jersey Business Action Center. The mission of the SBDCs is to help entrepreneurs and business owners start and grow successful and sustainable small businesses. And we do this through one-on-one business consulting, training, and technical assistance programs. To take advantage of the services of the SBDC, and these services are provided to you at no cost. They're paid for already by your tax dollars. So to take advantage of these services, you simply need to just visit one of the SBDCs. You can do that via any of our websites. Our website is right here in the bottom of the screen, www.rnsbdc.com. And simply click on the button that says Request Counseling, complete the form, and within 24 to 48 hours, we will assign you a business consultant. At that point, you may ask them any questions or express any concerns that you have with whatever issue is facing your business at the time, or if you need help starting a business. These sessions are normally an hour or more in length, and you are able to be assigned to a consultant that has expertise in the area in which you need help. We have consultants with expertise in marketing, in franchising, in government contracting, in accessing capital for your business. If you wanted to get into e-commerce, or you wanted to get into private labeling, import-export, we have a consultant with expertise to help you. Now, for the benefit of those attending today's webinar, audio has been muted. We have a much smaller group, so I may open it up at some point just so we have a more interactive feel to today's webinar, and you're able to ask questions as we go along. If we're unable to do that, then please use the chat or the Q&A feature here on Zoom and share your questions with us. We'll do our best to respond either during or at the end of the webinar as we go along. A copy of the presentation slide along with a recording of today's webinar will be emailed out within 48 to 72 hours of the end of this presentation. So please be on the lookout for that in your email. All right, so it's now my pleasure to introduce to you our presenter for today, Mr. Boynton Weeks. He is from FranNet. And so without further ado, I'll just turn it over to Mr. Weeks.
All right, thank you, Priscilla. Let me share my screen. All right, good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me? Priscilla, can you hear me fine?
I hear you perfectly.
Awesome. Listen, guys, as Priscilla stated, looks like we have a pretty small crowd today, and that's awesome. So feel free to sit back. Um, going to spend about an hour, hopefully just giving you some nuggets, one or two jewels to think about with regard to business ownership as it respects to as it impacts the franchising industry. So I'm gonna just say this, folks. Whatever questions you have, you could have been a lot of places and you're here. No such thing as a dumb question. If you want to put it in the chat or you want to shout it out if audio is enabled later, by all means, we can do that and we'll address whatever questions you have.
I've enabled audio for everyone. So if you do need to ask a question, just unmute yourself and you're able to interrupt and ask questions. But please do remember to mute your microphone after so we don't have feedback and everyone can hear clearly.
Awesome. Thank you, Priscilla. All right, guys, real quick, a little bit about me. So I've been in the franchising industry for about 20 years, both on the franchisor side and on the franchisee side. Prior to that, I was my situation was very much like yours, right? I was working in corporate America, going to work every day, but always thinking about owning my own business, right? So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that later. I also run a nonprofit out of Trenton, New Jersey, where I mentor young men between the ages of 8 and 18. And I am a proud alumni of Fairleigh Dickinson University. Excuse me. So a little bit about the agenda, folks. We cannot talk about business ownership and act as if the elephant's not in the room, right? COVID-19, the pandemic is real. We're going to talk a little bit about that as it respects business ownership today. We're going to talk about why business ownership. Folks, whether you buy a franchise or an independent business, you start up, whatever it is, I've interviewed hundreds of business owners over the years, and I can tell you that one thing they had in common was a compelling and sustainable why. So I'm going to share my personal why with you later, but here's one of those nuggets. Start to think about why you want to own a business, right? And it sounds simple, but it's deeper than that. We're going to talk about business options, right? There's really three platforms, folks, for going into business. You can start a business from your dream, your passion, your idea. It's the independent business route. You can buy an existing business, whether it's an independent business or franchise, or you can buy a franchise and run that business from start to finish as well. We're going to talk about pros and cons of all three platforms. We're going to talk about risks and rewards, right, of business ownership and franchising and whatever it is. Commonly, we think of franchising, folks, and we think of McDonald's and Burger King, right? Because those are the commercials that we see every day, right? And in our mind, we start to think, well, I must need $2 or $3 million to buy a franchise, and that's in fact not true at all. So we're going to demystify, if you will, some of those ideals. And lastly, we're going to talk about how do you identify the best business option for you. And another nugget is your must-haves. And we're going to talk more about that in a minute. So who is FranNet? I've been doing this for years, right? And anytime I ask people who is FranNet, 90% of the people, 95% of the people in the audience have never heard of FranNet. And that's fine, right? And so we've been doing this for a little over 30 years now. We're an international franchise consulting firm. And simply what we do in a nutshell is we match people to the right business model using a very strategic process, right? Most people Google franchising and a million things pop up. So they don't know where to start and they don't understand that there are people like myself out here that help you to use a strategic process to develop an understanding of the right business model for you. And the work we do with you doesn't cost you any money. And we have these tremendous partnerships with organizations like the Small Business Development Centers throughout New Jersey and New York and throughout the country. My office is in Metuchen, New Jersey. I live in Lawrenceville, and I also have an office in Manhattan on 34th Street, although I'm not going there right now. We do use a proprietary business tool called a personal franchise assessment. If you're interested in taking that assessment, at the end of this webinar, you'll have an opportunity to sign up for that. It takes you about 30 minutes of uninterrupted time to complete it online. And it helps us to help you figure out what industry group, what segment, what skill set you bring to the table that might align with the best fit. What are some of the benefits, real quick, of working with a franchise consultant? So, fact of the matter is, we're going to educate you on the various business opportunities as well as franchising as well. Think about the landscape of franchising. There's 3,600 franchises out there representing some 90 different industry groups. Well, where do you start? How do you find the right fit? That's what we are specialists at doing. We offer prospects choices so that you can make an informed decision. You get one chance to get this right, and we want to make sure that we get it right with you. We represent only about 200 companies. Remember, I said there's 3,600 of them out there. We only represent about 200 of highly vetted, selective franchises that we understand their success metrics. We understand that their franchisees are happy, if they're getting support, that there's no litigation in the franchise. So we've done all of that work for you. It's our philosophy here, friend, that not to be all things to all people. So we don't want to represent all 3,600 franchises out there. And then lastly, and I'll just mention this really fast if you're interested in resales, but in the franchising space, when resales become available, and sometimes resales are tremendous opportunities, well, they don't go to the open market. They come to companies like us and they say, confidentially, Boynton, we want you to find a buyer for this commercial cleaning business in Newark. Do you have anyone that's interested, right? So it gives you unlimited access to resales as well. Lastly, risk mitigation. You're going to hear me talk about risk throughout this webinar, right? So we're going to walk you through a very strategic process to help you mitigate and minimize the amount of risk associated with this business venture, right? And we're going to walk you through everything from legal into how to get funding. At the end of the day, folks, we do not sell franchises. We just represent them, and they pay us to find qualified, fundable people. Client Bill of Rights, I'm not going to read through it. I leave it in here so that if you request a PowerPoint, you can read through it and see what our commitment is to our clients. So as I stated when I was going through the agenda, folks, COVID-19 is real. It's not going anywhere. This is unprecedented, right? Fact of the matter is there's a downturn in the U.S. economy every 7 to 12 years, right? So that part is not unique, and it's not our first rodeo, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. What's unique about this is the healthcare component. So I like to call this a downturn with a twist, if you will. And so it is a little different. You know, we've seen businesses whose doors have been shuttered and closed and opened and then closed again, both in restaurants and hotels and fitness centers here in New Jersey, right? The supply chains associated with those specific industries have been tremendously impacted, not even taking into account the over 211,000 lives that have been lost. And this is creating some tremendous emotional strain on the folks that are thinking about business ownership. So here's the good news, folks, is it's not my first rodeo. It's certainly not Fran Hitch's first rodeo, right? I bought my first franchise in 2001. And so if you recall, what happened in 2001? We had the dot-com bust where companies were overly leveraged in the internet space from a stock market perspective, and that went belly up. And then in September of 2011, we had 9/11, and that had tremendous impact on the economy. And then again in 2008, we had the Great Recession, otherwise known as the subprime mortgage crisis, right? So we've been there. I've personally been there. And what I can tell you is we do come out of it bigger, faster, stronger. Today, we're facing COVID-19, right? So it's a downturn with a twist. We understand it. And where our focus is today is really on, at least until there's a little more clarity, recession-resistant, lower-cost, home-based, small office, service-based businesses. And we're going to talk more about that. You might even be surprised. This is a recent study by a company called Franchise Insights. And 54% of the respondents noted that now is a good time to start a business. 59% of them said they expect to start a business within the next 3 months, with an additional 17% saying within 4 to 6 months. 40% of them believe that business conditions will improve in 3 months or by the end of the year. And then there's about a quarter of the respondents that said they expect conditions to worsen. 18% of the respondents have put their search on hold. When I look at that survey and I overlay it with my clients, here's what I see today. 20% of my clients have said, Boynton, the pandemic is too much for me. I cannot go forward with considering business ownership. So that 20% over here, they have absolutely hit the brakes. And they will reemerge at some point in the future. Then I have another 60% of my clients who are in the middle. These are the ones that they're going through the yellow light, they're tapping the brakes, they're proceeding with caution. They understand that conducting due diligence doesn't commit them to a purchase. They're simply looking to get clarity and understand what are the opportunities available to them. And then, folks, I have the other 20% that are full speed ahead. They had some concern and trepidation in the beginning and now are understanding the opportunities. Many of these folks are what I call opportunists. They've been through a downturn in the past and they understand a couple fundamental facts when the United States economy is going through a recession. And as I mentioned, it's one every 7 to 12 years throughout time here in the United States. But the people that are opportunists, they're looking at this and they're saying, okay, these businesses have closed. Some of them may never reopen. So as a result of that, there's more available prime real estate and inventory in the real estate space. As a result of that, they also understand that the lease terms are better for people right now if you can see the forest for the trees, right? So the lease terms are getting better. As a result of those businesses closing, there are more people, unfortunately, unemployed. But for them, there's more of a pool of people looking for work, whether it's fitness, retail, hospitality, whatever it is, right? And then also, and this is important, the cost of borrowing the money today is at an all-time low. So my opportunists, the clients that are full speed ahead, and that's the other 20%, they see these boxes and it's checking the boxes for them. And so now for them, it's just a matter of finding the right fit. So as you go through this, try to drop yourself in one of these buckets and see where you are. Are you the hit the brakes person? And that's okay. Are you the tap the brakes person, or are you the full speed ahead opportunist? Why business ownership? I'll simply share my why, because as I said to you in the beginning, successful business owners always have a compelling and sustainable why. Why is that? Because business ownership is hard. It's not for everyone, but the more compelling and sustainable is your why, the more likely you are to work hard through the ups and downs of business ownership launching, right? And you're going to give 100% to do whatever it takes to make that business work. So oftentimes I say, to people, why business ownership? Well, I want to have more success. I don't have success in my life, or I don't feel fulfilled in my job, right? I'm working from home. I'm not getting the opportunities for advancement, or maybe it's flexibility or independence. Maybe you want more control over your life because you have young kids. Well, that quite frankly was my situation, right? Maybe you feel as though you don't have financial security. I have clients that have been laid off 2, 3, 4 times, right? So they're tired of being laid off and they want to have control over their life. And maybe they simply want to make more money. So when I think back to what my why was when I bought my first franchise in 2001, well, at the time I had a 3-year-old son and a 1-year-old daughter. My wife was a stay-at-home mother at the time. We lived with a beautiful home on the east end of Long Island. And I had a very successful career, stock options, company cars, all that stuff. I had what other people thought equated to success. But for me, I didn't feel happy. You know why? Because I had a 3-year-old son and a 1-year-old daughter that I wanted to spend more time with. So when my company said, Boynton, I need you to go to San Francisco, I need you to go to Chicago, that was more time away from my family, which wasn't what I wanted to do. And the only way that I was going to have ultimate success was to gain control, flexibility, fulfillment by starting a business. So think about your reasons behind why you're going into business. Very important, folks. The fact of the matter is, when my parents went to work years ago, it was, pretty linear, right? They went to work in a factory. They spent 30, 35, 40 years there. And they retired with a pat on the back and a gold watch. Well, as you know, particularly as we look at, people being furloughed and downsized today, the path to retirement no longer looks like that. And here's a visual depiction of how it looks more so, right? Furloughs, laid off, detours, rule blocks, downsized, right-sized, right? So that path to retirement is not as clear and as secure as it once was. But here's the good news, folks. Business ownership can provide that path for you. And the fact of the matter is, even with everything that is happening in the economy, there's still a rise in business ownership, and that's going to get better as we move through the pandemic. And there will ultimately be, hopefully, there will be a vaccine. So there's about 30 million small businesses right now in the United States. 65% of them have less than 4 employees, and 20% of them, are family-owned businesses. And this is data from the SBA.gov. Now, I'm sure you're sitting there and saying, well, boy, this is all great. Business ownership is on the rise. It's coming back. But yes, there is always risk. And that's where having a compelling why is sustainable. So here's what I hear from my clients. Well, going a job provides more safety, and I feel better keeping my job today. That's less risk than starting a business. I understand it, and that may in fact be true. Well, Boynton, I'll wait until the economy is better. Certainly understand it. Boynton, I'm concerned about time, money, and mistakes. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, I don't know how much money it's going to cost me to launch a business. I don't know how long it's going to take me to break even. How long is it going to take me to get to profitability, right? These are the things that we're working with our clients to help them understand these very real emotions around risk, right? But I don't have the knowledge it takes to run a business. Where do I even start, right? There's 90 different industry groups, 3,700 franchises out there. That's what we do at FranNet. We're walking you through the jungle so that you can understand if you have the right skill set, if you have the right money, do you have the right time to invest in a business? So what we've done at FranNet is we said, okay, there's a downturn in the economy every 7 to 12 years. That's factual, and you can go back and check it out, right? So what we've always done at FranNet, even before the pandemic, is we said, well, we can look at businesses that are basically, we can put them in 3 different buckets, right? And so the first bucket is there are growing markets that are driven by demographics. What do I mean by that? Well, let's take the senior care, healthcare services market, right? The reality is, folks, that there are 7,000 to 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day here in the United States. The number of people turning 65 is going to double, is projected to double in the next 10 years. So that baby boomer component is significant. In 5 years, this is an interesting fun fact, in 5 years, 50% of the population will be over the age of 50, and they will control 70% of the disposable income. So whatever business you're looking at, ask yourself if the fundamentals of your particular model, are they driven by demographics? And if it's that demographic, you could be onto something. Think about residential repairs and home modification. People are furloughed, or maybe they're working from home. Maybe they'll never go back to the office, right? So as we spend more time at home, we're looking around. We see things that need to be done or that we want to get done. So the home modification business is driven again by demographics as well. Um, we have an aging housing market here in the United States. And so let's think about the baby boomers who own the homes. Well, the older they get, right, and we talked about that, and they had the disposable income. Well, maybe years ago they were do-it-yourselfers, right, the DIYers, right? Well, as they get older, they have the money, but they don't have the time nor the desire to do the home repairs and all the stuff that they used to do. So they're outsourcing it to small businesses that are in the service-based sector. So while it may not seem like the sexiest space, it is recession resistant, and they are still doing well even during the pandemic. Think painting, uh, you know, fencing, anything around the home that involves remodeling and upgrades, kitchen upgrades, and things of that nature. And then let's not forget pet care. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, Boynton, why is pet care a segment that's driven by baby boomers or demographics, right? Well, the fact of the matter is, and I'll take my personal situation, when my kids graduated from high school and went off to college, someone convinced my wife that we need to take our 10-year-old Yorkie and put him in doggy daycare a couple days a week so that he could socialize with other dogs, which quite frankly he hates, right? But we still do it. Part of it is because we feel guilty, right? Because he's now home alone and we both work outside of the home. So pet care is the seventh largest industry in business in the United States and growing. It's a $70 billion industry. Think doggy daycare, doggy grooming. 80 million households in the United States have at least one pet. And so we've come to treat pets as, emotionally as well as we do our own kids, or at least that's the case in my house. And then in the other bucket, we have essential services, right? Think about commercial cleaning, personal home cleaning franchises, right? Again, maybe not the sexiest of businesses, but there's a tremendous need in our society. Think of my office as an example. Prior to the pandemic, I had someone come in and clean every Friday because I bring clients into my office. I can't bring them into a dirty office, an untidy office, right? Think about personal cleaning, tremendous segment, $6 billion industry. It's grown almost 7% year over year for the past 10 years. Um, and as we now are more focused on sanitation, deep cleaning, both on the commercial and the personal side, these are very attractive franchise opportunities. And both are under $150,000 total investment. Think about automotive industry. 300 million cars on the road in the United States today. You might be surprised to hear that the average age of the car is almost 12 years old. So what happens? The car breaks down. We're going to go and get it serviced at a reputable place. Think Meineke and Mako, right? These are all very tremendous automotive franchises. And keep in mind, folks, in the franchise space, they don't want you doing the personal cleaning. They don't want you doing the commercial cleaning. They don't want you doing the dog grooming. They want you to work on the business, not in the business. Managing the staff, marketing, recruiting, search engine optimization, all of the stuff to drive customers to your door and manage your staff internally. Think about damage restoration. You may not have thought about damage restoration as a viable business model. Well, the fact of the matter is, and you see it now more than ever now that we're working from home, we're being inundated by a plethora of commercials involving insurance companies. Think Progressive and Liberty Mutual and Allstate. Well, insurance companies spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year to acquire policyholders. And when they have a loss as a result of fire, think about what's going on in California right now. Fire, flood, water damage, whatever it is, their customers have to be made whole again. So damage restoration companies do good in good times and in bad times. And the nice part about this particular segment is you're not waiting on an individual to pay you. The insurance companies cut the check directly to you. And again, I've dropped pet care in essential services space again. And then there are businesses that help other small businesses succeed and stay in business. Here in New Jersey alone, there's 260,000 businesses. 90% of them are under $10 million. Well, what's the opportunity for you? Many of those businesses, small business owners, need business coaching, leadership skills, training, sales, right? So if that's your background in corporate America and that's what you were successful in, you could then parlay those skills into helping small businesses succeed. Think about staffing agencies and staffing franchises that help to supply the labor pool and the back office human resource management stuff to small businesses, because that's not the nature of the business that they're in. Or maybe you come from a sales or marketing background. Well, many small businesses need to outsource that expertise because that's not their business. So this is just a sample, folks, of some of the buckets that we look at as we consider good opportunities during a downturn in the economy. So other considerations, listen, senior citizens still need care, right? Cars will still need to be maintained. Homeowners historically prefer to fix their homes rather than move. And we have an aging housing market in the United States. Essential businesses still need support. Think about some of the signage franchises and the sign businesses that are out there and thriving today. As these businesses are shuttering their doors and reopening and changing the hours and the menus and the schedules, somebody's got to provide that printing and the signage. Think of companies like Fast Sign. These are tremendous opportunities. Children still need tutoring, even in a virtual world. Think Kumon, Mathnasium, Best in Class, right? All of these companies have now pivoted to a virtual environment because the kids still need to learn and get the help that they need in order to get the grades. And listen, bugs aren't going away. Preventative sprays will still be needed at all of their homes and businesses. So let's think about the three options for going into a business. As I stated earlier, you can start a business from scratch, buy an existing business, buy a franchise. Those are pretty much your three options. What are some of the advantages and pros and cons of both? Let's start with starting your own business. Here's the good part. You have total control. It's all yours. No one can take it away from you. It's your idea, your dreams, your passion. You're the king or your queen of that business. You make all the decisions, and you determine your own culture. That's very rewarding for a lot of people. What's the flip side of that? Well, you've got to create your own systems, right? There's no playbook that you're adopting, and you're going to hear me talk a lot about the playbook today. So you got to create the systems. What's your marketing channels? Who is your customer? What's their demographics? What's the psychographics? How am I going to get my product and service into the hands of my ultimate consumer? Where am I going to put my business, right? You're creating all of that. And for some people, that's very rewarding. But as a result of it, the banks, who aren't really in the business of taking risk, aren't going to be banging down your door to offer you money. So as a result, there's going to be limited financial options. That's just the reality. And so therefore, there's typically going to be a slower ramp up and conversely a higher failure rate. Does it make it bad? This is just educating you on things to think about. You can buy an existing business, otherwise known as a resale. What are the advantages? Well, guess what? That's great. There's existing cash flow. There's actual financial results. You can pour through 3 years of tax returns and get a pretty good fundamental idea of how well this business is doing financially. It's going to be much more attractive to lenders. Again, as I stated, they're not really into risk. They like calculated risk. So there's going to be tax returns that they themselves can also look through. There's already going to be a market established, customer base, employees, systems, all of that stuff is already there. And thus there's cash flow day one when you buy that business. Well, what's the flip side? The biggest one, folks, that on this list here is hidden. Well, let me start with the first one. It may be overpriced. What do I mean by that? It's often difficult to put a proper valuation on an existing business. Well, what does that mean? Here in the United States, people don't always, and it's unfortunate, but it is what it is, and you need to be educated on it. People don't always put all of the cash that comes through the front door into the bank account and ultimately pay tax on it, right? So when that's the case, how do you properly evaluate that business so that you can understand if you're overpaying or underpaying for it, right? So we do help you with that, but that is one of the disadvantages. The other thing is, why is the person selling the business? What is their hidden selling motive, right, or motivation? As an example, let's say I owned a Ace Hardware and you were looking for a resale. And you said, well, Boynton, why are you selling? Well, my wife and I, we were retiring in Florida. Well, is that my real reason? Or do I know that Home Depot and Lowe's are coming to town in 3 years, right? So you want to be conscientious and cautious and make sure you understand why that business is really being sold. And then there's also the issue of potentially employee defection, right? They love me, then maybe they don't love you. Buying a franchise. Again, there's pros and cons to buying a franchise as well. The biggest one, folks, quite frankly, is what I call a playbook, right? It's a proven business system, or at least it should be. And there's going to be training before you open and ongoing for the life of that franchise agreement, which is typically anywhere from 7 to 10 years. There's usually a lower failure rate because there's an effective playbook. You're not figuring out and creating the system. And as a result of that, there's going to be more financing options. The banks, the SBA, they love funding franchises. Why? Because of the playbook. Here's the disadvantage. There's going to be a structured operating system. You can't change it. You can't modify it necessarily. Newer franchises are a little more flexible than the more established franchises. But it's a structured operating system. And you're taking someone else's idea, cloning it, making it yours. And you can only operate in a specific and predefined territory. And you can only sell their products. And here's the one thing I often hear. Well, Boynton, I got to pay this thing called royalty payments. Yes, you do. It's the nature of franchising. I don't care if it's McDonald's or Chick-fil-A, right? There's going to be royalty payments, and you have to factor that into the model. So for some people, they can't get past that. I understand it, but the good franchisors are not negotiating that away. I'll pause for a minute and ask if there are any questions. All right, hearing none, we'll keep moving. So what is franchising? It's the creation of a distribution channel to build brand identity and attain market dominance quickly, right? And so basically what I mean by that is you're taking someone else's idea, cloning it, making it yours. For an initial franchise fee, they're allowing you to use the playbook and the name and the trademark, the golden arches, right? All of that becomes yours, the products, the business systems, in exchange for the royalty fee. That's the trade-off. Franchising is very regulated, folks. It's been regulated by the Federal Trade Commission since 1979. So whether you buy a Meineke in New Jersey or a Meineke in California, that franchisor is required to give you the same document. It's called a franchise disclosure document. And it's typically a very voluminous document as well. It could be anywhere up to 300, 400, 500 pages because it is a legal document where they outline in 23 items everything that the federal government requires them to disclose to you as the potential investor in that business. So it's going to cover everything from who owns the franchise and what is their business experience to if there's been any litigation or lawsuits from the franchisors against the franchisees against the franchisors. If there's been any bankruptcies affecting the financial situation of the company or its shareholders, as well as everything under item 7, all of your costs associated with the acquisition of this franchise. They are required to outline for you everything from the franchise fee to your furniture, fixtures, equipment, signage, insurance costs. All of that stuff has to be divulged in item 7. So remember I said to you earlier about risk and how do you manage that in the franchise world when people say, well, I don't know how much money it's going to cost me. How much working capital do I need? All of that's going to be disclosed for you in the franchise disclosure document under item 7. Your territory is going to be defined. Your renewal and termination and transfer policies, that's all defined for you. Oftentimes people have the notion that you buy a franchise and you have to stay in it for 10 years or 7 years. Fact of the matter is, if you build a successful business, and many clients that have done this over the years, if they want to sell it in year 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it is their right to do that. There's going to be something called a financial performance representation in item 19. This is very important. Here's where about 65% of the franchisors out there utilize this. And the federal government says, okay, with some delineation, you can outline your top 25%, top 50%, bottom 50%, however they want to do it, so that it gives you, the potential investor in that franchise business, some idea of how much money you can reasonably expect to make if you buy that franchise. Here's where I caution you. There's usually an asterisk somewhere in there, and you have to read the fine print. Just because the item 19 looks very positive, is that the top 10% of franchisees, or is it the top 50%? Is it the average? What is it? You need to understand what you're reading, and we'll help you do that. And then lastly, there's a list of outlets. Franchisors are required to list every franchisee in the system and their location and their phone number. Why is that important to you? Because at a certain point in the process, in order to minimize the risk, right? Risk doesn't go away. We're going to have you speak with franchisees who are in that system. And we want you to speak to the high-performing franchisees, those in the middle, and we want you to talk to some underperforming franchisees. Just because they're underperforming doesn't mean that they're necessarily unhappy, right? And so think about in your workplace where you work. There's the top performers and there's the people on the bottom. Maybe they're very happy with being on the bottom. But in order to get a good perspective as to whether or not this is a good investment for you, folks, don't just speak to the top performers. Get a really good broad assessment of how the overall franchise system is validating. So the term validation is something common in franchising, and that means when you're speaking to franchisees, what is it that you're hearing? Lastly, financial statements. Very important, folks. Franchisors are required to have audited financial statements updated every year and showing you that for the past 3 years. That's important. Why? You're investing in this company for 7 to 10 years. You want to make sure that they're on good financial footing. So we talked about validation, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Talk to all three. We're going to get into some common myths in franchising. And you probably found yourself in this bucket as well. Franchising is only fast food and retail. We think of that because of the commercials and, you know, Burger King and McDonald's and I don't know, where I saw another chicken place just open up around the corner from my office today as I was coming in. But the fact of the matter is, out of those 3,600 franchises, 3,700 franchises out there, only, if you look at this graph, only about 25% of them are actually food. 5% of them are full service restaurants, and the other 20% are what we call QSRs, right? That's the quick service restaurants. And after that 25%, it's commercial cleaning, damage restoration, automotive, it's real estate, it's retail, it's all of this other stuff that's available to you. So what does that mean? Well, you don't necessarily need $2 or $3 million to get into franchising. Myth number 2, franchises succeed because of the quality of product. And we know that's false, because certainly the burgers I make on a grill in my backyard are far better than McDonald's, right? My chicken's probably as good as Kentucky Fried Chicken, and my pizza's certainly better than Pizza Hut. But so what's the difference? Why are these companies successful? What's the purpose of this slide? Well, the quality of product and service is important, but it's the playbook. I'm going to say it again. That's what you're buying, folks. Don't fall in love with the golden arches. Fall in love and vet and conduct your due diligence on their marketing program, right? How are they going to get your product and service out there? The awareness, right? The recognition that you're in town, the sales, the operations, the accounting. When the money comes in, how do you spend it? what percentage of your overall expense ought to be allocated to cost of goods sold, right? All of that stuff is part of a good franchisor's playbook. Myth number 3, successful franchises emerge in new industries with no new competitors. Fact of the matter is, franchises do not even enter segments where there is no competition. If I had $1 for every time a client said to me, well, Boynton, I'm thinking about opening a business in my hometown because there's no competition. Well, sometimes that may be good, but more often than not, if there's no competition, there may not be any demand for your product or service. So successful franchises go into markets where there's strong demand and there's moderate to strong competition, and they're going to create growth opportunities through consolidation of the existing independent businesses. Myth number 4, high return requires a high investment. Why is that? Why do people think? I'm just going to plug my laptop in. Bear with me. Well, the reality is, folks, there's no automatic correlation between the cost of the franchise and potential return. So as I stated to you earlier, there are low-cost, home-based, small office, home-based, service-oriented businesses that the total investment might be 75, 100, 150,000, and have a very strong return on investment. So don't think that you need to invest $2 or $3 million to buy a business that's going to pour off a 6-figure income for you and your family. There's just absolutely no truth to it. Myth number 5, franchises are expensive. People think that because they typically think food, right? And so the reality is that 11% of all of the franchises, remember 3,700 of them, 11% are under 50,000 total investment. 27% of them are under 100,000, right? And then if you factor in the total number that costs under 250,000, you're upwards of around 60% of all of the franchises out there cost under 250,000. And quite frankly, that's our prime sweet spot here at FranNet. So again, you don't need $1 million or $2 million to invest in a business that might only cost you under $100,000, and you can still make a 6-figure income if you pick the right franchise. So how much money do you need? Let me break it down to you this way. If the franchise that you are considering or conducting due diligence on, let's say it's $100,000. In your mind, you ought to be thinking, do I have 20 to 30,000 liquid? And then as long as you have at least a 680 credit score, the lenders that I work with will fund the balance of your investment. Okay? So just use 100,000. Do I have 20 to 30,000? 200,000, do I have 40 to 60,000? That's sort of the metric, and a 680 credit score. Here's the other thing you want to think about as you move through the funding landscape in this pandemic. Some of the lenders are tightening up the underwriting criteria. And the one area where we see that happening is in the post-closing liquidity. That means how much money do you have left over after you make the investment in the franchise? So that's something to consider. If you have questions about that, we can talk more about it. So where does the money come from, right? Personal savings. If you have a rich uncle or aunt, you can certainly have them invest in the business or provide some startup capital. Home equity line of credit, we're seeing that more and more today. If you're buying a resale, will help you to possibly negotiate some seller financing, right? You may or may not know this, but there's something called a ROBS program. You can Google it, rollover as business startups. And it's a legal way to use your 401k money or your IRA funds from a previous employer. That's the catch, a previous employer. And you can roll that money into your business startup without paying any early withdrawal or income tax on that money. So that could be substantial. And it's technically your money. About 64% of my clients today use some portions of their ROBS program, their rollover money, to fund their business. And then lastly, something to consider is securities based or securities-backed lending. You might also hear that called portfolio loans. So if you had a stock portfolio and you had a couple $100,000 in there, I had a client 2 weeks ago with JP Morgan Chase, and he was able to take money out, borrow against his stock portfolio, and he was able to take the money out at 2%. He had access to the funds in less than a week. So also you can consider that as well. Myth number 6, industry experience is required. Fact of the matter is, in the franchise world, they're looking for someone who's not a renegade, who's willing to use their system, their playbook, and have the requisite skill set to run that business, right? So think of Meineke as an example. If you said to me, well, boy, I want to own a Meineke franchise, but I'm not a auto mechanic, I said, well, that's perfect. Do you have strong communication skills and customer service skills? Because that's really the skill set they're looking for. So every franchisor knows what skill sets they are looking for in terms of their most successful franchisees. And our job at Frandit is to help to match you with that particular franchise. Any questions? All right, so we'll continue to move on, leaning on your transferable skills. What is it that you're good at? Is it sales and marketing, human resources, operations and management? All of that stuff is important. And those are the categories and types of things we're going to talk about to see what franchise is the right fit for you. 2 ways to go into franchising, folks. Owner-operator business models, right? We talked about commercial cleaning, residential cleaning, home repairs, modification. Those are all what we call owner-operator models. They want you to be working that business full-time and not have a corporate job to commit to, right? That's the success metric for their model. So again, cleaning services, home improvement, even financial services. These are all owner-operator business models. So you need to understand what is it that you're investing in. And then there's the very common semi-absentee, or I like to call it semi-passive business ownership. Think of businesses like European Wax or Massage Envy. That's a good example, right? Think of Massage Envy. Although it's sold out in New Jersey, about 1,000 locations and 1 million customers worldwide, right? You won't go in to get a massage at Massage Envy and likely see the owner. Reason being, they probably have 2 or 3 or 4 locations. And so think of hair care, personal care services, fitness. These are all your typical semi-absentee models where they allow you to keep a full-time job, hire a manager. Otherwise, the other name for this is executive models and manage the manager models, right? So think Great Clips, Supercuts, Massage Envy. All of these are your typical semi-absentee business models. And it's good for people that want to retain their full-time job, minimizing the risk, right? And then after they get the second and third and fourth unit open, depending on how much money they're looking to make, it becomes then an exit strategy for them. Some of my clients are just looking for portfolio diversification, but they don't want to work in the business full-time, right? The semi-absentee models are good. So again, hair, beauty, fitness, wellness, all typical semi-absentee business models, right? They usually cost a little bit more money because it's usually brick and mortar based, right? And you know what the cost of real estate is in New Jersey. So why do you pay royalties? Real quickly, you're adopting someone else's idea, cloning it, and making it yours. So it is not free. It's how the good franchisors are able to grow and scale. And as they collect more royalties, they can open more stores, creating more brand awareness and providing more opportunities to support you, the franchisee. So in the franchise world, we like to say, folks, you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. So how do you find the right franchise? Let's talk about that. Here's some things to think about. Am I willing to follow the franchisor system, right? You have to have sort of a compliant personality, right? You believe in a franchisor and their success, and you're adopting their model. Is it affordable? Does it fit within your financial wheelhouse? There's plenty of opportunities out there. It's no reason to spend beyond your means to purchase a franchise. Let's find something that's financially comfortable for you. And then what is the risk level, right? You're going to help, you're going to be assisted with understanding that as you talk to franchisees who already made that commitment long before you came along. And then is it something that you're going to enjoy? Here's the other nugget that I talked about in the beginning. Develop your list of must-haves. These things are non-negotiable and unbreakable. And it should sound like a little bit like this. I want a business that has high demand, right? Hair care is an example, has high demand, right? I want a business that's recession resistant. We've talked about a lot of examples in that space. Maybe you want something that's Amazon proof. We see what Amazon is doing to the big box retailers in the United States. They're absolutely destroying them. Maybe you want a business where there's going to be minimal impact from future advances in technology, right? So let's go back to hair care, right? As technology advances, people still need to go somewhere to get their hair cut and their hair colored and their eyebrows managed, right? So advances in technology aren't going to necessarily impact your growth in that space, right? What sort of equity injection can you comfortably put into the business that is non-negotiable and unbreakable? Maybe you want a home-based business because you have young kids that are working from home in a virtual environment. That becomes non-negotiable and unbreakable. Maybe you don't want to work any nights and any weekends. Well, staffing franchises are Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, right? So develop your list of all the things that are non-negotiable, and you use that as you move through the due diligence process. So again, transferable skills, folks. Figure out where you are on the spectrum, right? Let's say you said to me, well, Boynton, my neighbor owns a staffing franchise. He's doing super well and just opened a second location. And I'd say, yeah, well, Joanne, I understand that that was a good fit for them. But in our conversation, what came out was that you're not a salesperson. You're not a hunter. On a scale of 1 to 10, you're not a 10. You're more like a 3, right? Well, staffing franchisors are looking for hunters. They're looking for that person that can go out and knock on 10 doors, get 9 no's today, and wake up tomorrow and do the same thing without losing motivation to build that business. So every business model is looking for specific skill sets. Where do you fall? How many employees do you want in the business? Do you want a business that has blue collar employees or white collar employees, right? Maybe in our conversation, you tell me you're not comfortable managing blue collar employees. However, you really like the personal cleaning or commercial cleaning space, right? It's recession resistant. It's doing well in this environment. Well, your employees are going to be blue collar employees. So right there, you're going to have to address the disconnect, right? So all of these boxes matter, right? What's your budget? Do you want your business environment to be located on Main Street or in a nice little office park where I am, right? How much time do you want to put in your business? 20 hours a week because you still have a full-time job, or do you want to jump right in, right? All of these things matter. They seem basic, folks, but I can tell you, as certain as the day is long, so many people fall in love with the playbook or the model or the quality of the product, and they forget the items like this. You got to get into the weeds, and that's where I'm going to help you do that. So earlier I stated we have a proprietary tool that we use. It's called a personal franchise assessment. It takes you about 30 minutes to complete it online. And it helps us to work with you and help you understand what are the things that are important to you in your life, right? What motivates you? What are your values that are important, right? What are your core competencies and skill sets and transferable skills? That's what this assessment allows us to do. It's free to you. And if you want to complete the assessment, it's at no obligation and no cost. As we wrap up, it's 2:00. Here's some quick little data from the SBA. So after 2 years, 64% of businesses are still open. That's great. After 5 years, that number drops to 50%. What we do at FranNet is because we've been doing this for over 30 years. we also track the success metrics of our clients as well. So that 64% of people that are in business after 2 years, FranNet consulted clients are 91% of the time still in business. After 5 years, that number goes from 50% to 85%. We've been doing this a long time. The reality is, folks, is 7 out of 10 clients that I work with today do not even buy a business today. Part of that is I'm pretty honest and forthright, and I'll tell you, or certainly enlighten you on some things you ought to be thinking about and reconsidering, because maybe today is not the best time. And those clients appreciate it, and they come back 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. Building a team, folks, as you go into this thing, are you working with the right franchise consultant? Do you have the right franchise attorney? Do you have a good accountant? All of that stuff matters, right? Some great books for you. And I give out this book, Street Smart Franchising, to all of my clients, written by Joe Matthews. Tremendous read. But you know what another good book is? The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. It talks about working on the business and not in the business, right? And so if you want a couple quick reads, that's a couple right there if you're in the reading. Here's my contact information. I'll leave that up for a minute. My personal saying, if it's to be, it's up to me. And so whether you're buying a franchise or independent business, your success is predicated upon how much time, energy, sweat equity, and did you make the right choice in the business that you bought? And how hard do you want to make it work? If you have a cell phone, you can kind of open it up to the camera and you can put it over this handy dandy QR code here. And it'll create a link for you that you can use, and it'll ask questions like, would you like me to connect with you on LinkedIn? You know, what was the seminar helpful to you? So there's a little bit of a survey in there. And also, if you want me to contact you, I will. If not, that's fine as well. We don't want to waste your time or mine. And also, if you want to simply complete the no obligation personal franchise assessment, there'll be an opportunity for you to check the box there. The assessment will be automatically emailed to you, and then I'll connect with you at that point. So that is my 60-minute brief on franchising 101. I hope it was helpful. Hopefully there were 1 or 2 nuggets that you could take away from today. So I'm willing to stay around for a few minutes if there's any questions.
Mr. Weeks, I think I don't know if you answered this already. I was in and out. I think Rachel asked, how do you access an FDD? Did you see that?
I did not. I didn't even go into the chat. I apologize.
No problem.
Rachel, are you still there? Is she still there?
She's still on the
Hi,
call.
yes, I'm still here. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. He loud and clear. How you doing, Rachel?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
I'm well, thank you. So what happens is, as you begin to move through the due diligence process with a particular franchise company, they're required to send you a copy of the FDD long before you sign anything or do anything. They are required by law to give that to you. So usually they'll give that to you anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks in the due diligence process.
Okay, so you do have to begin the process before you can access the FDD.
Absolutely. Now, there are some websites out there, and I'd have to look into it for you, that will provide certain franchise companies FDDs, but they charge for it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Feel free to unmute your microphone and ask a question. It's a small group, so it's okay.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. You was mentioning that in order to do the franchise, first we have to know what franchise you want to go into. Also, how would you be able to get the loan?
Yep. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name. What's your name?
My name is Latoya Francis.
Okay, how you doing, Latoya?
I'm doing great.
Okay, so pretty early in the process, you and I would work together to kind of see what your financial situation looks like, right?
Right.
And I'm going to provide some information to you, through a Q&A that's going to allow you to determine if you are fundable today. And then if you're not sure, I'll put you in contact with a couple lenders and they'll walk through that process with you at no cost to help you figure out if you're fundable. Now, what does fundable mean? Maybe it means that instead of investing in a franchise that costs $300,000, maybe based on your current situation, you need to be focusing on a franchise that costs $80,000. Right? So for everybody, the situation is different. Here's what I'll tell you though. In order to get franchise funding, you have to have at least a 680 credit score. And then depending on the total investment, you have to have skin in the game, what we call the equity injection, right? And you have to have 20 to 30% of that available to you, either in your savings or stock portfolio, from a rollover account, whatever it is. And then the bank will provide the remaining 70 to 75% of the loan. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Oh, take it home. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry, I didn't unmute my mic.
Okay, that's all right.
Hello, this is Simone. Can you hear me?
Hi, Simone. I hear you. How you doing?
Hi, good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Thank you for that valuable information you just did. I have somewhat of a unique question. I know this is about franchising, but is it only for U.S. base or U.S. National franchise, or can it be applied to international franchise?
Yeah,
And
great question.
to follow up on that is a two-part question. Sorry.
Okay. Mhm.
To follow up on that, I know franchise is mostly focused on profits. However, I'm looking at a social enterprise franchise. How can that model fit in what you're presenting?
Okay, so first part of your question is it can be international, right? Some franchisors are looking for international growth. And, social enterprise, what does that mean exactly?
So rather than focus on profit as an end goal, really the outcomes is really on a social aspect of really outcomes of the clients.
Okay, so there are some franchise companies that, that might be part of their model. We'd have to investigate it and look at it and see what's available to you in that space where they're less focused on ROI and more focused on, maybe the outcomes or sustainability of the clients or whatever it is. So we'd have to do some work, right? We'd have to do some research. And that's where we kind of walk down this road together to see what's out there based on what it is you desire.
Right. Okay. Because you kind of touched on a point, like, what my values are. And that's kind of like where I'm aligning myself with right now.
Absolutely. And that's where the personal franchise assessment would be helpful for you.
Oh, thank you.
If you want to take the assessment and we'll go through it together. And if there's
Yes.
something that I can work with you to fit that desire and that goal, we'll do that. And if there's not, I'm not going to waste your time. I'll tell you, we don't have anything.
Okay, good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Yep.
Mr. Weeks, a question here. Have you come across franchises where the startup needed for it is under 25,000?
So startup meaning so when you say startup, right?
The investment needed.
Okay. Yeah. So for the total investment under 25,000, we personally don't have anything in that space. Where our sweet spot is here at FranNet, it's 50,000 total investment and on up to somewhere around 250 to 300,000. It's kind of the sweet spot that we focus on, unfortunately.
What type of businesses are around that $50,000 range?
You can do that. There's some commercial cleaning opportunities in that range, 50, 60,000. There's some tutoring franchises, education franchises that provide supplemental education, if you will. So there's quite a few in that space. There's quite a few. Digital marketing, providing back office digital marketing and support, search engine optimization, things like that, because they tend to be home-based franchises.
Correct. So
If
that's what I was looking for. Something home-based, something that may have dealt with, virtual assistant, digital marketing, as you said. That was pretty low cost.
Yep. So we do have some in that space, particularly in the digital marketing space, which is doing very well even today, as a matter of fact. I'm sorry, who asked that question?
No, a friend of mine, actually.
Okay, got it. Okay, got it. Okay, that was Priscilla. Okay, gotcha. Okay,
Yeah.
yep.
Okay. Is there any other questions? We still have a few more minutes here.
Hi, this is Simone again. Another thing that just came to mind in terms of international franchising, how does I guess the legal aspect come into play in terms of trademarks and I guess I can't remember the word right now, but government regulations and laws? Will you work with me on that as well?
Yeah, so usually what happens on the international side, Simone, is you're not going to be the first one going into that market, right? So they've already probably planted a flag there, and they're just looking to increase the number of flags. So they already have an infrastructure in place that's already addressed all of the local laws and trademark and import-export issues. All of that's going to be taken care of before you go into that market.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions, folks? Don't be bashful. And if you feel like you want to talk more online, I think you have my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me. This is what I do. This is what I'm passionate about. I love creating opportunities where people become business owners and they become successful over time. And they reach back and they say, Boynton, thank you. That's what gets me out of bed, folks. So don't feel like you're wasting my time. I enjoy this.
Okay, while we wait to see if there's any other questions, I just wanted to reiterate that a copy of today's presentation will be sent out to you. Of course, that will contain all the contact information for Mr. Weeks, as well as on the screen, there's some contact information for the SBDC. Just know that we do offer one-on-one consultant services. It may be in the area of franchise, and it may be in the areas of business plan, getting together your business plan if you needed help with someone, reviewing that, or if you, as Mr. Weeks said, some of these franchise, all of the franchise, they do need a certain credit score. There's a minimum here, and we also do offer credit counseling. We also have options if you need to know if there's any programs out there for access to capitals, particularly for those who are trying to start a business. I know that may be difficult sometimes, but we do have lenders, and we do know of programs that work with startups. So feel free to reach out to the SBDC, and we'll assign you with someone with the expertise in any area that you're looking for assistance with. And I think I started by saying a copy of the slides, as well as a copy of today's webinar recording will be emailed out within the next 24 to 48 hours. And as we close this webinar, you will receive a pop-up on the screen for an evaluation. We do ask if you can please take 1 to 2 minutes of your time and complete that evaluation. It will greatly assist us in our planning for the upcoming year 2021. We're trying to figure out which programs to keep and which ones to introduce. So your feedback is greatly appreciated. Is there any other questions before we close? Okay, so it looks like there is none. So I would like to say thank you to Mr. Weeks for taking the time out again, and giving us this webinar. You know, your sessions are much better in person, but in the situation in which we all are, we have to work with what we have. And so thank you for taking the time out to give us a very informative webinar. I would like to say to everyone, thanks for tuning in, and we hope to see you on future webinars. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Good luck to you. Take care. Thanks, Priscilla. Great job.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.